The village looked like a place the world had forgotten. Red dust covered the ground like a permanent blanket, and the wind carried the dry smell of earth and smoke through narrow paths between small mud houses. Chickens wandered freely, children ran barefoot through the dirt, and clothes hung from simple ropes stretched between wooden poles. Life here was quiet, hard, predictable. Most people woke up before the sun appeared above the hills. They walked long distances for water, worked small pieces of land, and returned home as the sky slowly turned orange again in the evening. Nothing extraordinary ever happened here. At least, that was what everyone believed. In the middle of the village lived a young man who owned almost nothing. His clothes were worn from years of use. His house was barely larger than a single room, and the bamboo growing around the riverbank nearby was one of the few resources the village had in abundance. But one morning, something strange began. While most villagers were starting their daily routines, he carried several long pieces of bamboo to an empty patch of land beside his small house. He laid them on the ground carefully, measuring distances with his hands, staring at the space as if he could already see something invisible there. At first, people thought nothing of it. Villagers passed by, glanced for a second, and continued walking. In places like this, people often built small sheds or fences from bamboo. It was normal. But by the afternoon, the structure on the ground began to look different. It wasn't a fence. It wasn't a shed. The bamboo poles were arranged in angles that seemed strangely precise, forming the outline of something much larger than a simple village structure. A few people stopped walking. Someone laughed. Another person shook his head. "What is he doing?" someone asked. Then the answer came quietly, almost like a joke. "He says he's building a luxury house." The laughter spread through the small group standing nearby. A luxury house here, in a village where most homes barely kept the rain out. No one believed it. But the young man kept working. And none of them realized that what they were laughing at was only the beginning. The next morning, the sound of bamboo being cut echoed through the quiet village long before the sun fully rose. The young man worked with patience that seemed almost unnatural. Each bamboo pole was selected carefully, trimmed, cleaned, and placed beside the growing structure. His hands moved slowly but with intention, as if he had already built this house many times inside his mind. Villagers passing by began to notice that something unusual was happening. The frame growing in that empty field did not resemble the small huts scattered around the village. It was taller, wider. The angles were sharper, and the foundation looked stronger than anything they had seen before. Some people stopped to watch. Others whispered among themselves. "Why build something like that here?" one woman asked. "He's wasting time," someone replied. "He thinks he's building a rich man's house." A group of older men stood under the shade of a tree nearby, observing the strange project. They had built houses all their lives, but this structure did not follow the patterns they knew. Instead of simple square walls, the bamboo frame curved slightly upward. The roofline looked higher, more open, almost like the houses people saw in magazines or on television when electricity was working. Yet everything was made from the same material that surrounded them every day. Bamboo. Cheap. Common. Everywhere. But in the young man's hands, it was becoming something else. By the end of the second day, the frame of the house stood proudly above the red soil. Tall bamboo columns held the skeleton of a structure that was far larger than any other building in the village. And suddenly, something changed. The laughter became quieter. People were still skeptical, but now there was curiosity mixed with their disbelief. Because if this continued, if he actually finished it, then the poorest place anyone could imagine might soon have something no one expected to see there. A luxury house, built entirely from bamboo. and the structure rising from the dust suggested that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't joking. As the days passed, the construction began to attract more attention than anyone had expected. Children gathered first. They sat on the ground nearby, watching every movement as the young man climbed onto the growing structure, tying bamboo beams together with strong natural fibers. Each connection was tight, each joint reinforced carefully. Soon the adults came as well. At first they pretended not to be interested. They walked by slowly, glancing at the construction while continuing their conversations. But eventually many of them stopped completely, standing quietly around the site. Because the structure now looked unmistakably different from the humble homes surrounding it. The roof frame rose high above the ground, forming elegant lines that curved gently upward. Wide openings suggested large windows that would allow sunlight and fresh air to flow through the house. The bamboo walls began to appear next. But they were not simply stacked poles like the walls of traditional huts. Instead, they were woven together in intricate patterns, creating surfaces that looked almost artistic. Some villagers stared at the walls in disbelief. Others ran their hands across the smooth bamboo, surprised by how strong it felt. "Where did he learn this?" someone whispered. No one knew. All they knew was that the building rising in front of them no longer looked like something built by a poor villager. It looked like something far more ambitious. And the most surprising part was still to come. Because the young man had not yet begun the details that would transform the bamboo frame into something truly extraordinary. Soon, the house would begin to reveal the secret that had existed only inside his imagination until now. And when that happened, the laughter from the first day would be impossible to forget. By the end of the week, the bamboo house had already become the most talked about thing in the entire village. People who lived far away began hearing rumors about it. "They say someone is building a luxury house," one traveler told another. "In that village?" the other replied, confused. "Yes, from bamboo." Many didn't believe it, but those who visited could see it with their own eyes. The walls were now complete, woven in complex geometric patterns that filtered sunlight beautifully into the interior. The roof had been covered with carefully layered bamboo strips, creating a structure that looked both traditional and surprisingly modern. Inside the house, the young man began working on something no one had expected. The floor. Instead of leaving the ground bare like most homes in the village, he installed polished bamboo panels across the entire surface. When sunlight entered through the open windows, the floor reflected a warm golden color that filled the space with light. Some villagers stepped inside for the first time. They stood there quietly, looking around. The interior felt completely different from the small, dark huts they were used to. It felt open, bright, almost luxurious. And suddenly the laughter that had filled the village only days before felt very far away. Because the house that everyone believed was impossible was no longer just an idea. It was becoming real. And when the final details were finished, the contrast between this house and everything around it would be impossible to ignore. The final stage of construction began with details that seemed almost unnecessary to many villagers. Decorations. The young man carved bamboo panels with delicate patterns, installing them along the walls like artwork. He built wide balconies where people could sit and watch the sunset over the hills. A staircase appeared next. A staircase in a village where most homes had only a single room. But this house had a second level. From above, the view of the entire village stretched across the dusty landscape. Rows of small huts, narrow paths, and children running through the red dirt. And in the middle of it all stood something that looked completely different. A house that could have belonged in a wealthy city. Except it was made entirely from bamboo. People who once laughed now walked around the building slowly, examining every detail. Some of them touched the smooth bamboo walls. Others stood at the entrance, unsure whether they were even allowed to step inside. The contrast was impossible to ignore, because outside the house, the village remained exactly the same. Simple, poor, humble. But inside those bamboo walls, something extraordinary had been created. And the most powerful moment had not yet arrived, because the young man still had one final step to complete. The moment when everyone would see the house exactly as he had imagined it from the very beginning. The finishing touches took 2 more days. The young man installed large bamboo doors, polished the floors until they shone under the sunlight, and arranged simple handmade furniture inside the rooms. Tables, chairs, shelves. Everything built from the same material that grew naturally along the riverbanks. Yet when assembled together, the result looked nothing like the humble village surrounding it. The house looked elegant, modern, almost unbelievable. News of the strange construction spread beyond the village. Travelers stopped along the road to see it. Some even took photographs, shaking their heads in disbelief as they tried to understand how something so beautiful had been built in such a poor place. Inside the village, people spoke about the house constantly. "The poor man built a rich man's home," someone said. Another replied quietly, "Maybe poverty only limits those who stop imagining something better." And slowly, the laughter from the first day became something else entirely. Respect. Because what had once seemed like an impossible dream had now become a reality standing in the middle of the red dust. And the final moment was about to arrive. On the day the house was finally completed, the entire village gathered around the bamboo structure. Children stood at the front, eyes wide with excitement. Adults remained behind them, whispering quietly as they stared at the building that now towered over the surrounding huts. The young man stepped back from the entrance and looked at his creation. The sunlight reflected off the polished bamboo walls, casting warm golden light across the ground. The balconies overlooked the village like terraces of a small palace. And suddenly, the contrast that defined this entire story became impossible to ignore. Outside the house, dust, poverty, and small mud homes. Inside the house, space, beauty, and a structure that looked like it belonged in a completely different world. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then someone from the crowd said quietly, "This was built here." Another voice followed, and we laughed at him. The young man didn't respond. He simply opened the door and invited the villagers inside. One by one, they walked through the entrance, stepping onto the smooth bamboo floor with disbelief written across their faces. Because sometimes the greatest creations are not built by the richest people. Sometimes they are built by those who have almost nothing except imagination.